I used to pray to God to bring an end to the rain. I'm wondering if there would ever be an end to the pain. I'm feeling like, God, why don't you remember my name? To the point I didn't believe in heaven insane. I lost faith, even though I never should. Yup, I had it hard, but I should have understood. It was all a test that would make me stronger, but it hit harder than a dunk by Vince Carter.
Santi, you call yourself a mental health advocate. How did you get to that stage where you felt like you needed to advocate for mental health?
You know, for me, I think it really came out of my own lived experience and, then seeing my mom go through her challenges as well. And then, I was a teenager, early 20s when all that was happening. And then as I got older, I started to develop more perspective around what mental health challenges really looks like. Because you grow up and you see on TV and the media and you say, oh, these are people who are just talking to themselves and hearing voices and all of that stuff. And I mean, certainly that's the case for a lot of people. But for, I would say, more people who have mental health challenges, it doesn't look like that. And, it happens in silence and then it looks like coping in other ways.
Growing up in a culture also, a Black culture, where you just don't share that information. You don't share what goes on behind closed doors. You keep that to yourself and to your family. So you even sharing about your mom and her struggles with mental health. Tell us about that as a young boy growing up in a home where you probably didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I didn't know what was going on. When my mom got diagnosed with depression way before any of, me or my two older brothers knew what was going on. We just thought she was a quiet person who would like to spend a lot of time alone. And then, she had a incident where crisis workers showed up at the house because she was suicidal. And then, we all found out what was really happening. And I was about 14 years old when that happened. And then for the next 4 or 5 years, she was really battling and really struggling. Then she started to turn the corner and get better. Then I was kind of focusing on my stuff. Anyway, I mean, what I remember from that time is that, we just couldn't talk about what was going on with anybody. So I was going to school every day, and people would see that, there was maybe something not, there was something not stable or not okay about how I was presenting. But, I didn't talk about it, and I was getting good grades, and I was still succeeding in other ways where, I was captain of a basketball team or whatever. So, people didn't delve too much into it. So it was easier to hide because I was doing, superficially, I was doing well, but realistically, I wasn't.
And so decided, or a couple times, wrote suicide notes.
3 times.
3 times.
3 times.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I would say each time, the thing I think people sometimes don't get about suicide is that you don't actually want to stop life. You want to stop suffering, right? And that's where I was at, is I wanted the suffering to stop, and I was very motivated to do something to make it stop, whether that's suicide or whether that's changing my life. However, the path to changing my life circumstances, especially when you're young and you don't have a lot of power in society or financial power or the ability to really make moves like that prior to the internet generation where now, I mean, there's a lot more ability to do that. It felt like there was no way out.
The more I live here, the more I die. Slowly at first, but faster now. Desperate, my soul clings to the light. As I wallow in the fright of eternal night. Despite my fight, I cannot resist the cold that bites my bones whenever the sorrow wind blows.
There was a turning point for you, and I feel like when I read your story, it was so simplistic, but it was so beautiful. It was seeing other young people enjoying life.
Yeah, so my best friend, his mom, what she does is she runs a daycare out of her place, right? So I like kids a lot. I don't know, I just like their energy.
Yeah.
So I would go over there all the time and help out, even when I was super depressed. And I remember there was just a moment where I was sitting on the couch and watching, these kids play and just seeing how invested they were in life. And they just had this like zest for living. And it made me think about my own childhood and how I was as a child, as, this very curious and precocious and, kind of jubilant, high energy person. And for, by the time I became a teenager and, then young adulthood, I wasn't that person anymore, and I forgot what that person was like. But then I saw those children, and they reminded me of who I was before, all the struggles of life started to pile up and, manifest in depression and anxiety and suicidality. So I looked at those kids in that moment, and it made me want to recapture that essence of just wanting to, be fully invested in my life. And at that point, I just said to myself, I just took suicide off the table. And I said, yeah, it's really hard, and I'm suffering a lot, but I'm gonna figure out a way out of this.
I think sometimes people hear a story like yours, Asante, and they think, okay, are you fine now? They think, you just turn a switch. And mental health, mental illness is something that goes with a journey. And there are gonna be good days and there are gonna be bad days. And so you making that decision that day, did that end everything for you? Did that bring back this normality in your mind? Or did you feel like, do you still battle with mental illness to this day?
I mean, yeah, I do. At that turning point moment, it probably took, several years after that before I reached a baseline where I felt mostly okay most of the time, which I would say is true now. But it takes a lot of work to maintain. It's not like I just get up and I exist and I'm okay. It's very intentional in terms of the decisions and the choices I make in order to remain okay. I need to be intentional about the people I have in my life and intentional about my relationships and setting boundaries and letting people know what I'll accept and what I won't accept, and being intentional about not isolating myself when I do feel myself going down, and rather, fighting the voice in my head.
Thank you so much, Asante, for sharing your story with us today.